Welcome to our Sound for Video session. It is the 10th of December 2016, and we have a number of questions. Let's go ahead and dive in. First of all, from Eddie. Hi, Curtis. I subscribed to your channel recently. I've been asked to take videos of my church choir. I'm using an A7R2 with a Rode Stereo Video Mic Pro. Since it is not a directional microphone and I am recording about 20 feet away, the sound is far from acceptable. Instead of investing money on a directional microphone, I'm wondering if it would make more sense to buy an external recorder, say a Zoom H4, attach this to my existing Rode mic, and place this on a stand as close as possible to the choir. Then I sync the sound with my video later. Your professional opinion is very much appreciated. Kind regards, Eddie. Eddie, good question. Technically, the Rode Stereo Video Mic Pro is somewhat directional, but it is a very wide pickup pattern. I agree. 20 feet away, yeah, that's going to be, I don't know how loud the choir is, but that does sound like that's probably a little bit more, a little farther away than you probably would like to be, unless you're trying to get lots of room sound. It sounds like that's not the case, so I understand what you're trying to do here, I think. You don't say exactly which Rode mic you have, but yes, I think getting that a little bit closer and then recording that into a field recorder is a great option. If it's something like a shotgun microphone, you're going to need to experiment with that a little bit because shotgun microphones have some of the tightest pickup patterns possible. So if you get too close, you're just going to pick up a couple of people in the choir as opposed to the entire choir. So you're going to need to work with that a little bit. If you could clarify which Rode mic you have, that would be helpful as well. If it's a cardioid, you can get in pretty close, maybe somewhere in the 5-foot range, and probably be able, or maybe 5 to 8 to 10 feet range, depending on how large the choir is, and probably pick them up pretty nicely. Now, I would probably not recommend a Zoom H4 at this point. That is not the best recorder. Let's just take a look here really quickly. I do have a session on an episode on my YouTube channel that I would recommend having a look at. Depending on which mic you have, if you have a Rode Video Mic Pro, which is a shotgun microphone, however, it is a shotgun microphone with a relatively wide pickup pattern, a Zoom H1 would be sufficient in my opinion for most cases. But of course, there are a lot of other choices. I would not buy the H4N or the H4. I would at least buy an H4N Pro at this point. Much cleaner preamplifiers. H4N Pro, I would say, is kind of the minimum you want to look at if you're getting an XLR feed from another microphone. My preference is actually the H5 if you can. Save up just a little bit more money and go for that. H6 is also very nice. And of course, I love the F4 and the F8. Of course, those are a much bigger investment. And we've talked about those as well. So hopefully, Eddie, that's helpful for you. And again, if you have more detail and you want to talk about it a little bit more, go ahead and leave a question. Happy to talk about it more. All right. Next question from Sam. Please, could you do something on wireless audio monitoring on set for boom op, director, producers, etc.? Yes, this is, I don't do this a lot. I will confess now. I'm working on small enough pieces where I don't generally need to do that. If the director wants to hear the sound, usually on these smaller productions, what I will do is just play a few samples for them. Just let them have my headphones and play a few samples for them just to give them that confidence that they're getting what they're really looking for. However, if you do need to wirelessly send some audio, kind of the simplest solution is essentially using a wireless lavalier system in reverse. If you've got something like that, that will work. Now, a lot of them don't have headphone outputs, so what you do is, well, which is irrelevant actually, but essentially what you use is a transmitter connected to your audio recorder, taking the audio signal out of your audio recorder, transmitting that to the receiver, which the director or whomever, or the boom operator or whomever is wearing, and then they actually just stick a set of headphones. And this is where it gets a little tricky. If you don't have any sort of output control from the receiver, for example, Rode Link does have some kind of crude output controls, not fine grained. So you also need to come up with a solution there as well. So it's outputting a microphone level signal, and depending on your headphones and their ohm rating, you may or may not be able to hear that well. So you're going to need to potentially also have sort of a headphone adapter there as well. That gets a little bit more complex. I'm going to need to look into this a little bit more. Again, I don't do this regularly. It's a great question. And in fact, there are some who on the channel have talked about this some and have a little bit more experience with that. And perhaps we need to talk to them and bring them in on the show and have them talk about how they've done it. But great question, Sam. I'll be back with you with more information at some point in the future once I get a little more experience with that. All right, next up we have a question from Mohammed, it looks like. All right. Hello, Curtis. What is the right level in decibels for dialogue voice in a vlog? And if mixed with background music, I assume that's what BGM stands for, what would be the level of music? And what is the best level of music alone without voiceover? I do vlogs, edit them in Premiere and Audition. I've found minus 12 dB to be too quiet. I agree. Minus 12 dB is the recording level that I typically aim for, sometimes even lower than that. And I'm just trying to get my peaks at that level. And the reason I do that is to leave enough headroom so that if something gets really loud in the shoot, then there's a little bit of headroom to be able to absorb that without clipping and distorting. That's not the finished goal. The finished goal, if you're going, in your case, you're doing vlogs. So I assume you're posting these videos online. And for online, the general recommendation is to loudness normalize to minus 16 LUFS for a stereo piece or minus 19 LUFS for a mono piece. And Mohammed, I will link to a piece where we talk about that in a lot more detail. I don't want to bore everyone here. We've talked about this quite a lot, but I'll go ahead and leave a link to that in another piece that you can find. So I think what a lot of people assume when they're first getting started, including myself, is that you record and you upload and you're done. And with sound, if you're really trying to take your sound to the next level, it's not that simple. There's production sound, which you're kind of aiming for a certain level of your peaks to hit minus 12. But then in post, you definitely need to pull in some of those peaks a little bit and loudness normalize the overall audio so that it hits a consistent and loud enough level so that your audience isn't straining to have to hear it and aren't having to adjust their volume up and down throughout the piece. So good question, Mohammed. I hope that'll be helpful for you there as well. Okay, the next one from Rebecca Murray. Curtis, very often when I use the dynamic link between Premiere Pro and Audition, the audio is so much louder in Audition. I'm wondering if this might be a setting because I don't recall acting this way until recently. Peaks that are well below minus 6 dB in Premiere appear to be boosted so much that they are distorted and clipping after being imported to Audition. Have you ever experienced this? It's the craziest thing. Rebecca, that is a fine question. So here I have in Premiere, let's just pull this up here. We have this piece. If I just right click here and then edit this in Adobe Audition, here we go. I don't seem to have that problem. So this is very much what I would have expected. So perhaps there is a setting. However, when I looked through those settings, I didn't see anything obvious. And there was someone else that asked me about this as well fairly recently. And I suspect maybe there is some sort of setting. I don't know what it is, to be entirely honest. What I would also have you confirm is if you hover your pointer over here on the dB scale and you move your scroll wheel, if you have one, I just want to confirm that you haven't changed it to something like this, where you're just adjusting the scale. You're not actually adjusting the waveform here. So if I right click here and say zoom reset, you can see, okay, it takes it back to its normal level here. But if you zoom way in, you can see it looks like it's actually cutting things off. I don't know if that's possibly what happened, but if you just right click on the scale here, zoom reset. If you've confirmed that and it's still an issue, I hate to say it, but you should probably contact Adobe for a little bit of support on that. I have no idea how it's doing that. I assume it actually is doing something because it sounds like you're actually monitoring it in Premiere and then not changing the volume level on your playback system, and it's playing back much louder in Audition. So yeah, there's definitely something funny going on there. If you wouldn't mind too, I haven't had a chance to talk to them, but if they get you a solution, I'd be very curious to hear what that is for the broader audience as well. All right. Thank you for that question. Next up from Sanjeev, can you please demo as to how I can modify my voice to have more bass in it? or to make it sound with more punch like those voiceover experts before I merge it with my video. You could show me an Audition, or if there's anything even simpler, that would be great. Secondly, after modifying the voice, will Audition be able to do the auto sync with my video since the sound waves might have changed? Thanks, Sanjeev. So, Sanjeev, that's a good question. There are some production things you can do there as well. The closer you are on the mic, the more bass it's going to pick up generally. Now, this is a dynamic mic. This is obviously not a shotgun or something you'd normally use for film. But if, and I'm not clear on whether you're doing, I assume you're doing some sort of video where the microphone is outside of the frame, so you're using a shotgun mic or a lavalier mic or something. So if you are using a shotgun mic, pulling it in a little bit closer, still keeping it out of the frame, can increase the bass response. That's probably the best thing you could do because it's going to sound a little bit more natural that way. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and bring it over into Audition, which actually we already have. And here, what I would use is a parametric equalizer. So I'd come up to Effects, Filter and EQ, Parametric Equalizer. And what you could do if you wanted to start with is you could do something here like Vocal Enhancer. Now, this is a preset that comes with Audition. And a lot of people use it just to kind of make their voice sound awesome and radio-y. I don't really like the settings that are default here. I think especially here on the high frequency, they boost it way too much. It's 13.9 decibels a boost. I would pull that way down in most cases. What that does, it adds some air to the sound. And that's fine. I don't have anything against that. And again, you use your ears to tweak these settings here until you get a sound that you really like. But I would pull this down quite a bit, maybe, 6 decibels at the most here. There's often usually a cut, or the default is there's a cut at about 291 hertz, around 300 hertz. And that's to take out some of the muddiness. But then there's also a boost here at 110 hertz. And again, it's too extreme for my taste. In most cases, it's 6 decibels by default. I generally, again, pull that down to about 3, which is a little bit more manageable. And then I would just leave the high pass filter turned on. So you can experiment with that. That's kind of a decent starting point. It's called the Vocal Enhancer. And then, by the way, if you do dial in a sound that's working pretty well for you, you can save a preset by just clicking this icon right here, Save Settings as a Preset. And you can say have your own Vocal Enhancer preset. So that's another thing you can do. And then once you've applied that, just go ahead and save it, and it's back in Premiere, and you're set to go. So hopefully that's helpful for you, and that gets you started. The overall idea is if you want to add more bass, you use an equalizer plugin. But again, I would definitely look at production things first. If you can get that microphone a little bit closer, that's going to take care of a lot of it for you, and it will sound a lot more natural in most cases. So hopefully that gives you some ideas there, Sanjeev. Okay. And I think we have at least a couple more questions. This is from Marshall. The first question I want to ask is this. I've recorded a man speaking the same lines in 2 different locations. I used the same microphone to do this. The first location was in a home with carpeting. The sound is pleasing without any noticeable problems. The second location is the ruins of an old cabin. The floors and walls were just aged wood. I did use a couple of blankets on the floor, but the sound has much less bass. I need to be able to cut between the 2 scenes and have his voice seem like it came from the same place. Common issue, definitely understand what you're saying there. I've read that I may be able to match EQ using iZotope. In fact, searching that is how I found your site, but I do not have iZotope and would like to use what I have. Is there any way to match clips using Audition? Of course. And that's pretty much just using what we talked about here. So again, going in and using the parametric equalizer, using the either the Vocal Enhancer preset or just using the parametric equalizer to kind of boost the areas. And what I would do is load both audio files into Audition so that you can kind of A and B them. That is, play back the first one, then the second one, you can kind of use your ears to guide you how to make adjustments on the one in the cabin to match the other one. Now, that being said, in the ruins of an old cabin, it's a very different acoustical space than the carpeted living or family room or whatever it was. So you're not going to be able to match them 100%. I would say the goal generally is going to be to match them so that they're not jarring to the listener or the viewer. Just enough so that they can tell they're in a different space, but that it's not, again, so different that it just jars them out of the whole experience and what you're trying to convey to them in that piece. So there are some thoughts there. Again, same exact thing. Sounds like what we need to do is spend a little bit more time talking about equalization. So I will probably bring that up again in another episode here coming in the near future. Second question is this. It appears I record sound in a similar way to you. Is your specific workflow available in writing? And if so, where do I find it? I've watched the videos and having it to read would make it easier to follow. No, frankly, it's not. It is in my course, the post-processing course, but I haven't written it down, and I will look to add that to the course. So thanks for your energy. Really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you, Marshall. I hope that's a good start, at least. I know it wasn't super in-depth, but hopefully just at least points you in the right direction to get started there. And then finally, a question from Julian. Hey, Curtis, can I use my shotgun mic, a Sennheiser MKE 600, for run and gun interviewing at conferences? What are the pros and cons? The answer, Julian, is of course you can. The pros and cons, well, that depends on how you're using it. I don't remember on the MKE 16. Let's just take a look here. Okay, so the MKE 16 looks like it's an XLR output mic. This is one I think my brother has that we used one for one shoot. Let's just get the technical specifications. Yes, and you can also purchase, it looks like, XLR to 3.5 millimeter adapters. So yeah, you definitely can use it on top of your camera, or you could use it to boom it over the talent for run and gun. I'm assuming if you're saying run and gun that you're not going to have someone that can boom the mic. That would be the ideal, to be honest. The problem with conferences and things of that nature is it's generally very loud. And the ideal position for a mic to isolate your subject from the rest of the crowd noise is boomed up above, pointed down at a 45-degree angle. So that way, you're picking up the sound of the talent and whatever's down on the ground below them, as opposed to pointing it straight at them while it's mounted on top of the camera, where A, you're generally a little bit farther away, and B, you're picking up whatever sound is behind them, as opposed to what's on the ground behind them. So everything behind them. So that's not an ideal situation. So that's going to be the con. If you are mounting it on top of your camera, you're still going to pick up a fair bit of room noise. And unless you're working in very close, you're also not going to get that rich dialogue sound that you typically get when you boom a mic literally just out of the frame. And by out of the frame, I mean maybe 40 centimeters above the top of their head. So, or so. So that's going to be the con. It's going to sound thinner. It's going to sound more ambient. You're going to pick up more of the room sound. You're going to pick up more of the crowd sound and things of that nature. So if there's any way you can boom it up above them, have somebody attach it to a boom pole and boom it up above them just out of the frame, that'll give you the ideal sound. I realize that's not always possible for practical reasons. But yeah, if you put it on top of the camera, it'll be better than the camera's microphone, almost certainly. But it's not going to be, like Hollywood big budget sound quality, just so you're aware. So yeah, definitely could work and definitely could be a fine solution. All right, so that is the total of our questions for this week. This session here, I didn't do any post-processing. I'm just getting back from annual holiday with my family. We went to Hawaii for a week. It was wonderful, and it was so busy that I didn't have time to do this sooner. It's just Saturday here. I'm just getting back. So hopefully those are some helpful things. Also, by the way, if you hadn't heard and you are into the Zoom field recorders, the F4 and the F8, which we've been talking about quite a bit lately, they have released their new product here. You can see here called the Zoom FRC8, which is an add-on mixed control surface that you can add to your Zoom F4 or F8. I'm very excited about this. I've already pre-ordered it. And should be getting it sometime in January, it looks like. But what this does is it gives you physical linear faders. So these are your faders here. Actually, let's go and get some bigger pictures here. There's a bigger picture. So these are linear faders, and they're not huge. Like a lot of the professional. Well, this could be professional as well, but the nicer faders are actually 100 millimeters in length. This is a 60 millimeter, so those are kind of the two standard sizes. 60 millimeters, the smaller one, so that kind of makes sense in the case of the Zoom F4 and the F8, which are very small recorders. So this looks very nice, and then of course it has the gain trim potentiometer here, so you can set the gain. It has a 12-segment meter for each channel, which is really nice. Pre-fader listen. Button for each channel, and then an arm button for each channel, so you can quickly turn off individual channels. It gives you a quick way to change the output levels, some other really cool stuff. So we'll talk about it a lot more once I get my hands on it. But for those of you that were interested, this looks like a really neat add-on for cases where you're going to be recording, where you can be on a cart or a table, and you want to be able to mix various channels together a little bit more easily than just using the Zoom F8 or the F4 on its own. So we will have another piece coming up on that pretty soon. So hope that was helpful for you today. Thanks for the questions. We will talk to you again next week.